Today we're going to analyze some SPSS data using an AI-powered tool called Vizly. How we're going to do it is stepping through an SPSS assignment from Cal State Sacramento and checking the answers that we get back from Vizly against the answer key for the assignment. The assignment that we're actually going to look at is looking at exploring views about immigration in the US, specifically for the General Social Survey in 2014. Where you can actually get that data is if you come to this website, which I'll link in the description, you're going to have to go ahead and download the 2014 data. What I want to do now is I want to actually look at the lab itself. The lab is actually broken down into 4 different parts. One is around descriptive statistics, inferential statistics, and relationship between variables, and then finally a summary. So the one that we'll look at today is actually around inferential statistics, just because I think it's a little bit more interesting. And then at the end, I'll show you some of the descriptive statistics capabilities of Vizly. To start out with the inferential statistics, we'll have to go to page 26. So here on page 26, we'll see the lab is based around generating confidence intervals. And so we'll go ahead and actually start to read this lab a bit. And skipping a bit of these things here, you'll see that the first question they ask us is, what is the average and standard deviation of the age variable in the 2014 GSS sample without weights, right? So this is a weighted variable, but we want to see what is the value of this without the weights. So what we can actually do with Vizly is if we come back to the tool here, what we can do is actually go ahead and select our file. Either you can drag the file into Vizly, or you can go ahead and just select it here. So I've selected the file now. What I'll do is I'll go back to the lab and I'll actually copy the question here. So what is the average and standard deviation of age in the 2014 sample without weights? So we'll actually just ask that question directly without any other pre-processing, and we'll see what Vizly is able to generate for us. So what Vizly does under the hood is it actually generates code for you and translates the question that you had into code, and then executes the code and presents the results. So in this case, we can see that it's telling us the average age unweighted is 49.01 and the standard deviation is 17.41, which if we come back to the lab, we can see that this is actually the correct answer. So 49.01 and 17.41 in the answer key as well. Now, the next question is asking us to do this as a weighted estimate, or the weighted mean and standard deviation. So what we can do is, what is the average? Again, we'll just copy that same question, which is saying, what is the average and standard deviation of age of the 2014 GSS sample with weights? And then we can see here in the steps for how to turn on the weights, they're actually saying that this variable, WTSSNR, is going to be the weights. So we're going to say use
WTSSNR as the weights.
Right? And we'll go ahead and ask Vizly to actually calculate that for us again. And so what we're seeing is Vizly's gone ahead, calculated the weighted mean now this time is 47.42 and 17.22. So if we go back again to the answer key, you'll see 47.42 and 17.22. So far so good. Everything's matching up with what we'd expect, but just happening a lot faster because of the power of Vizly. Now, what we want to do is continue on. So now they're looking at calculating confidence intervals. And specifically, they're asking about calculating 99% confidence intervals. So what we'll do is we're going to say, what is the point estimate of age of adults in the US? And I'm going to say, give the
point estimate for 95% and 99% confidence interval.
And I'll show you why I'm doing that in a second here. And again, it's executing the code. So we can see it's telling us the point estimate is 47.42, which again, back to the lab, that's correct. That's actually the same answer that we had before. And then it's telling us what is the lower bound for the estimated mean of age. And the lower bound is 46.75. The upper bound for the estimated age is 48.08. So in this case, I think there's probably a little bit of a rounding error, 48.09. So the reason I actually wanted to do both the 95% confidence interval and the 99% confidence interval is that actually in this lab, it's asking us to do 99% confidence interval, but there's actually a slight mistake, because if we follow on how they're interpreting the answers, they say that they are 95% confident. So there's just a slight typo in the lab here. And so we'll see that the answer for the 95% confidence interval actually matches up with the expectations that we have in the lab as well. So that's great. So that's the confidence interval steps. Now we want to do one sample hypothesis testing. And so the first step that we see in this lab is that they're going to actually recode this variable letin1 into a dichotomous variable. And what that means, a dichotomous variable, if you're unfamiliar, is taking something that might have multiple categories and actually mapping them to 2 categories. So in this case, there's a whole range of options somebody in the survey could have responded to. So for example, increase a lot and increase a little will map to the category of 1, and then remain the same and decreased will map to the category of 0. So that's kind of the dichotomous variable. So let's start first with the recoding step, right? So again, how we're going to go ahead and recode it is we're actually going to just copy this into Vizly. So we're going to just say, let's recode the variable letin into a dichotomous variable. And what I'll do is actually type out what we want to do. So this is how we're going to map our dichotomous variable. We're going to send that to Vizly, and that's going to start doing that for us. Now, once we've gotten that, we can see the first few rows. And what we want to do is actually do what they ask us to do here, which is in the lab, they ask us to run the frequency distribution table of your new variable to confirm that 85.9% of the sample disagrees that immigration should be increased. So we're going to just send that actually directly here and see what that looks like. Okay, perfect. So Vizly has confirmed that for us. So now what we want to do is actually run a one sample t-test and figure out whether we can reject the null hypothesis. So this is kind of the values that they've defined for us. So you can see the values that are defined here. And this is what we want to actually do, is run the one sample t-test. So what we want to do is go ahead and actually ask Vizly to say,
run the one sample t-test on lesson 1 recorded. The test proportion expected percentage
is 0.982, and I'll show you where I got all these values in a second here. So basically what I've done is taken the examples for how they're telling us to run the one sample t-test, which is to select the variable let1, which we've done, under the test proportion write the expected percentage, which we've also done, and then it's asking us to interpret the table. So run the one sample t-test, and we're going to just go ahead and submit that. And so Vizly is going to go ahead, again, write the code for that and start to run that value for us. So we can see the one sample t-test was conducted. The sample mean was 0.41, sample standard deviation, sample size, t-statistic, and p-value. And because we're comparing p and the alpha value that we decided, we can see that we can actually reject the null hypothesis because our p-value is very low. So we can actually even just ask,
can we reject the null hypothesis?
significantly different, and so we can reject the null hypothesis. And Vizly's given us the same answer that we could have used to answer the result here. So that's an example of even doing a one sample t-test. I'll actually go back now to the descriptive statistics portion and show you Vizly making some graphs. So if we go now to the table of contents, and if we look at the lab, so lab 3 is describing the data using graphs. What I'll do is actually go to page 9, describing the data using graphs. And what it's saying is, let's do a pie chart of the variable race and then answer some questions about it. So I'm going to copy that in again. So Viz is going ahead and actually computing these values for us. And we can see it gives us the pie chart of race. It's fully interactive, the chart. And we can see the questions that they're asking us: what percentage of the sample are white? If we come to our graph here, we can see 74.5%. What percentage of the sample are black? 15.2%. And again, both exactly the same, a little bit of rounding difference on each, but exactly the same as what we would expect in our answer key. And we could do the same for our bar chart, for example, and we'll ask for the bar chart and then answer some questions about that as well. So with the bar chart, we can see we get our bar chart of the responses, and it's asking for percentages. So add a percentage annotation to each bar. So what I'm asking Vizly to do is actually add percentage values on top of these bars so that we can answer some of the questions. So we can see the percentages are now added. We have, the question is, what percentage of the sample agree strongly that legal immigrants should have the same rights as Americans? And if we come here, agree strongly, it looks like 6.84, which again is the correct answer that we see here. Same thing, disagree strongly, 10.31. And again, you see that answer there. So this just shows you a broad overview of all the capabilities that you have with Vizly to analyze SPSS data or any other sort of data set you might have. I look forward to you trying it out for yourself. And please, if you have any questions, leave it in the comments or feel free to try out Vizly for yourself. So thank you so much and really appreciate your time.